Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Richard Meros, B.A. ONS. Now, without being too forward, when I do these shows, I quite like to pander to the intellectual accomplishedness of my audience. And given that Wellington suffered a little bit of to and fro with the Hobbit premiere, I'd like to recalibrate. And the way that you can help me do this is by showing me your hands and raising them high in the air if you, like me, are the proud holder of a degree, a tertiary degree as conferred by a registered university or wānanga or internet service provider. Yes, it's still Wellington. It's like a Hitler Youth Rally. Okay, could you keep your hands in the air if you, like me, have an honours degree? There's some good follow through. What about masters? Wow! And are there any doctors in the house? Oh my goodness. Madam, what is your doctorate in? New Zealand drama. Okay. What is your name? Lee. Lee, I have to be honest with you, some of tonight's show might fly a little bit under your head. But that is okay, because I did notice there are some people in here without a degree. May I see one of those people or more of those? Does everyone here have a degree? Oh, sir, thank you so much. Sir, what is your name? Brad? Brad, perhaps you'll be able to help Lee with a few of the pop culture references as they come up. But I don't want any of you to fear. This show is utterly inclusive. Check this out. As you can see, this nuclear PowerPoint presentation is chock-a-block full of state-of-the-art whiz-bangery. Most of it is going to be very exciting and visually dynamic. But on a quick housekeeping note, one effect that I'm going to attempt to pull off tonight involves pyrotechnics. So, in the unlikely event, sorry, I'm going to rephrase that. In the event that my tinder dry gorse and broom here catches fire, your nearest exits are straight out through the guts there, and the assembly point will be the tasting room below us, if it still exists. If worst comes to the worst, the drinks will be on me. Now, yes, when I say that the drinks are on me, I mean 1 pint of beer or 1 glass of standard house wine. Now, I am sorry to be so draconian about this. It's just when it happened to me in Dunedin, it cost... one drink each. But thank you so much for coming. It's very brave of you. We're about to go on a hell of a journey together. In fact, I salute you. Now, this is just a salute that says hi. It's nothing sinister. But as I discovered during the course of my research, different kinds of salutes can say all sorts of different things. There is the regimented military salute, the chillaxed surfer's salute. There is the rock fan salute to his or her Dark Lord. There's a cell phone salute. There's a salute for people who like Hitler. There's a salute for people who don't like Hitler. There's even a salute for people who are related to Hitler. Now, Peter, you'll note the lack of movement in the commoner joint, the wrist. Some salutes get quite tricky. A good widdy is very hard to pull off, as is Arkela, we will do our best. Live long and prosper has its challenges, and at the extreme end of the spectrum, blood. But this is a salute that says good on you. Tonight, I am here to salute the Southern man. This is a salute of great significance. It is intended to honour, to affirm, and to elevate the most significant, complex, and above all heroic figure of our life and times. And it all seems a bit much, doesn't it? A bit OTT. By the end of this lecture, you all will be convinced, as I am, that this solitary, evasive, and allegedly fictional character is in fact our man of the hour. This is the hero with the ability to lead us from the depths of our economic wilderness to the glory of the promised land. Is everyone okay? Oh, yes. First, I'm going to prove that we are a nation in need of salvation. I'm going to do this through a blend of cold hard facts and bucolic analogy. Next, I am going to prove that the Southern man is the hero whose time has come. To do this, I'll provide a brief biography of the Southern man, tracing the genesis of his resilience, his resourcefulness, and his grit. Next, I'm going to elevate him to his rightful place in the pantheon of heroes through a flattering yet accurate comparison between his skills and achievements and those of fellow He-Man Hercules and the local firebug Maui Tiki Tiki Ataranga. Having proved his indisputably heroic credentials, I'm then going to apply aspects of his alpine philosophy to a series of the world's most niggly issues, like climate change, with thrilling results. Then, we'll go hunting. The lecture will end as it began, with a salute, in recognition of a future that will be better than now. And we're all going to go away better off. Yes, in response to your questions, there will be self-commemorative teaspoons available for sale in the foyer. But for those of you, like Brad, with no tertiary qualifications, you will leave this theatre tonight with a Level 3 NCEA Achievement Standard. For those of you like Lee, it's even better. 2 flybys points. Or as the Minister of Education, Hekia Parata, put it on national radio this morning, potato, potato. So, what's gone wrong? Where to begin? Companies are tanking. Farmers are grumbling. Homes are leaking. Cities are crumbling. Brains are draining. And old people are retiring in their droves. We are literally faced with a metaphorical chasm of extinction. We are on the socio-economic equivalent of the Tangiwai Express. And Santa Claus is coming to town. As you can see, the problem is so great that even the metaphors can no longer usefully contain it. It's terrifying, it's overwhelming, it's almost like we need someone to save us. But what is the nature of our emergency? Do we need the ambulance, the fire brigade, or the Ninja Turtles? We can't know who to ask for help until we know the exact nature of our catastrophe. Just as Israel wouldn't get far calling on Jane Goodall for help with the Hamas guerrillas. So, what's gone wrong? How did we get here? And where are we? Thank goodness we are in Downstage theatre. Because the one thing that theatre doesn't do appallingly badly is take macro socio-economic problems and embody them in an emblematic individual. Christina knows what I'm talking about. She knows that Hamlet symbolised England's existential angst in a sea of dynastic problems. She knows that Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman symbolised the death of the American dream. And of course, in The Sound of Music, Liesl von Trapp personifies the all-too-human dilemma of being 16 and going on 17. And dating a Nazi. Alas, these characters were iconic of simpler times. Where is our everyday everyman. What poor, lonely, unfortunate, melancholy malcontent can in and of themselves crystallize the multifaceted catastrophe that is our lives? Well, Peter, to put it in layman's terms, being the canary down the mine shaft is a dirty job. But in order to save others, some birdie has got to huff the butane. Happily, with profound regret, I can reveal to you tonight that the full gauntlet of our troubled age is easily personified in terms of my recent life experience. Allow me to explain. 4 years ago, the economy tanked and I hit rock bottom. Rock bottom is an overused term that conjures images of a long, graceful freefall, terminating in a painful yet mercifully quick splat. Nothing could be further from the truth. The truth is that you arrive at rock bottom like a fence post arrives at the bedrock, through a long series of blows to the skull delivered by the mallet of life. In 2008, I had spent the past 5 years researching and publicly expounding the conditions and possibilities of Helen Clark taking me as her young lover. Thank you, it was a great show. But it led to emblematic problem number one, and that is an overly hyper-specialised workforce. Because I had convinced thousands of New Zealanders, including some of you in this very theatre, that her doing so would be the path to a new golden age. Election night 2008 came a change in market conditions. Helen and I were both given the pink slip. Helen lost her job, but I was out of a career. 5 years spent becoming the world-leading academic in her specific niche. Now, it was gone. What was I meant to do? I can't tell you the number of people who have come up to me and said, "Hey Richard, why don't you do a show about having sex with John Key? That would be a hoot." As if I were a swing voter. As if retooling my hyper-specialised utility into John Key were as simple as screwing a new bulb into an old socket. Besides, I did ask, and he said no. I was like the Kiwi. The Kiwi had been a successful hyper-specialist, just like me. The Kiwi now relies on government handouts for its continued survival, just like me. My Work and Income New Zealand case officer was interested in my work experience. I was interested in why the Work and Income New Zealand logo looks like a man strangling a chicken. Neither of us appeared satisfied with the replies we received. I told him that my skills involved rationalising personal coalitions with erstwhile centre-left autocrats. He told me that he had never really thought about it, but he didn't think that it was meant to be a chicken. He asked me what kind of jobs I'd be willing to accept. I vowed to entertain the offer of any employment that allowed me to contribute to the whimsical redefinition of the national zeitgeist. He told me there was a need for seasonal fruit pickers in central Otago. On arrival at Wu Chi's cherry farm, I received what appeared to be a blood-stained bucket and a grand speech. Wu Chi prides himself as the Deepak Chopra of seasonal contract labour. And this led to emblematic problem number 4, over-optimism in the marketplace. Each bucket of cherries was worth $4. According to Wu Chi, the picker who believes can pick a bucket every 6 minutes. That is some $40 an hour, some $320 a day, some $1,600 a week, some $83,200 a year. In anticipation of my soon-to-be received earnings, I booked staff accommodation at Wu Chi's staff quarters, and I arranged a line of credit with Wu Chi's company store. Sure, Wu Chi's baked beans cost twice the city price, but I was about to start earning twice the average wage. It quickly dawned on me that the fast picker to whom Wu Chi had been referring must have been a Hindu freaking deity. Because I could never pick more than 2 buckets an hour. After withholding tax of 20%, my accommodation costs of $170 a week, and my rapidly compounding grocery debt, I quickly became known around the orchard as the Usain Bolt of the race to the bottom. I presented my findings to Wu Chi, along with a reasoned and dispassionate analysis of my situation, and suggested the following carefully thought-through solutions. Like the Greeks, I suggested restructuring my grocery bill, taking into account the real-world value of baked beans. Like the Americans, I offered to foreclose on my staff accommodation and occupy Wu Chi's front lawn. And like everyone who has ever been involved in manual labour, I suggested a deflation in the unit of productivity. Like the Germans, Wu Chi thanked me for my suggestion and then handed me an itemised bill for the full amount owing. Only one option remained: total sovereign default. I fled Wu Chi's cherry farm with nothing but the clothes on my back and Wu Chi's teenage son's new purple-rimmed Nike low dunks on my feet. I know that stealing is wrong, and I'm also fully aware that Nike has been accused of some dubious ethical practices in its third world factories. But you guys have to understand this from my point of view, because I was then where we all are now. Hyper-specialised, over-indebted, obsolete, a diminishing return, unable to reform either myself or a system that had so cruelly set me up to fail. So I ran. I ran beyond the tortured regiments of orchard trees, beyond infinite varietals of vineyard glut. I ran beyond the concentration camps of dead-eyed dairy cows. I ran beyond the lifestyle blocks, beyond Shania Twain. These Nike feet in double time leapt over Michael's golfing green. I swam down valleys, traversed the bungee-scarred ravines. I climbed above the reach of broadband, beyond the bars of mobile phones, beyond the blades of heli ski, beyond my own redundancy. I shed my shame. I shed my clothes. I shed my student loan. The night came in to cover me. I was utterly a horse, a dog, a hut. The table was a door, and the door was a spare piece of roof. A wire clothesline above the fireplace hung 2 woolen socks, a yellowing singlet, and a tea bag. Whiskey and hot water pressed into my hands. His face was craggy. He was weatherboard and corrugated iron. He was old stone buried in the hills. He was leather. He was tobacco. To describe him is to describe... I was a carpenter, a fencer, a shepherd. When nights were warm, we slept beneath the stars. When nights were cold, we slept beneath the stars and pulled up another dog. We hunted the hills, We caught trout in rivers without a license. We smoked them over open fires without a permit. I remember the handle of a knife I used to skin a deer. Though I recall being vaguely vegan at the time. We drank our tea black. No milk. No sugar. We tended a flock, and a flock tended us. Not once did we speak. There was nothing to say. I woke up in Queenstown District Hospital with Wu Chi at my bedside holding my hand. He told me how worried he'd been that I'd been found naked and incoherent in the middle of Wanaka's puzzling world maze. No, in all other aspects, I was in peak physical condition. My asthma has never since returned, nor has my hay fever. My hands were calloused. I returned to Wellington to find my benefit cut off and a burning hypothesis in my mind. As I've proved, my cruel fate is an exact parallel of New Zealand's cruel fate. The Southern man saved me from my cruel fate. So my hypothesis is that the Southern man can save us all. I know. It's a big leap. And I also know the old Chinese proverb that he who attempts too great a leap forward risks tearing his balls. So, let's work through this logically. First, I had to be sure that the Southern man was real and not a hallucination brought upon me by fermented fruit and fungicide. In times of epistemological crisis, I go to the one place I know I can find the raw facts. The Miramar Public Library. In order to understand who the Southern man is, we must know where he came from. This is what I found. The Southern man was born a pioneer. Ingrained in him was a refusal to labour for lairds or lose fingers to the dark, satanic mills of industry. While other colonists cheerfully whipped their slaves in African diamond mines or played polo on seekback while sipping gin and tonic, the Southern man determined to earn his own keep from the sweat of his own brow. He chose a land where winters froze and summers scorched, and what he'd been told was a bird's eye view of his landholding turned out to be the side of a cliff. He made do. This, after all, was God's own country, and being a Protestant, his God had very low standards. Trees won't fell themselves, he reasoned. Land's not going to go grab itself, nor will the natives suppress each other. A pioneer, he did everything. He was butcher, carpenter, farmer, fencer. His hands became leather and his mind became sharp. He is resourceful, he is resilient, and he is as Kiwi as a Lamington, wrapped in a pavlova, baked inside a Neenish tart. But is he a hero? I mean, come on. Look at us. We're a semi-educated bunch of open-minded, theatre-going cultural capitalists. Surely the Southern man is an anachronism, a throwback, a decreasingly effective way to sell spates. Far be it from me to attempt a sarcastic character assassination from the book depository of trendy liberal elitism, but it's 2012, Southern man, and you're still behaving like a cross between Robinson Crusoe and North Korea. Who in their right minds would good keen man alone the incessant lambing, weaning, docking, fleecing, mulesing and slaughter required of the farmyard death camps upon which we build our fragile economy? Have you not heard of the joys of Sudoku, Southern man? Or lattes? Or biscotti? Or Pilates? Southern man? What about EFTPOS? I was once where yous are now. Except I was in the Miramar Public Library. I abandoned my research and I sought solace in the classics. And it was there that I discovered the shocking parallels between the Southern man and a registered, accredited, card-carrying hero called Hercules. According to the historian Walter Disney, Hercules, Latin name Kevin Sorbo, lived around the 14th century BCE. His father was Zeus, his mother was mortal, and his midwife was a weasel. Initially, Hercules pursued an agricultural calling, marrying and raising a family before killing them in the exact same way that David Bain didn't. The judicial system at the time favoured restorative justice, and Hercules was sentenced to 10 years community service, during which time he reported for work on 12 occasions. It is the tasks that he performed during this time that have given rise to Hercules' status as a hero. As we can see, the guts of it involves pest control, deer recovery, pig hunting, and general farm management. In 10 years of labour, Hercules is best remembered for a catalogue of achievements that might not look out of place on the Southern man's Monday morning to-do list. With the exception of the panty stealing. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't believe that that makes the Southern man any less of a hero. So, the Southern man is clearly a hero in the ancient Greek mould. But what of a more local comparison? Meet Maui Tiki-Tiki-a-Taranga, the Polynesian demigod. Not to be confused with Tiki Tāne, the Polynesian demi-musician. Maui had a rough start to life. Like many Māori, he was born dead and raised by kelp. Like the Southern man, Maui is a pioneer hero and embodies the heroic virtue of innovation in the face of adversity. When it got a bit cold, Maui discovered the secret of fire. When land was scarce, Maui fished some more up. And when the day got too short, Maui beat up the sun. And we do chuckle, it's a very modern reaction, but we have to remember that at the time, brutally crippling the sun was the only means of enacting daylight saving legislation. Remember, this was some 2,000 years prior to the emergence of Peter Dunn. So, after favourable comparisons between Hercules and Maui Tiki-Tiki-a-Taranga, we can see that the Southern man is clearly a hero. But it is what makes him our man of the hour that brings me to my next point: contextual heroics. In her 1984 hit single, Holding Out for a Hero, Bonnie Tyler asks rhetorically, where is the streetwise Hercules to fight the rising odds? I feel that the reason that this song remains so fresh to the modern ear has less to do with the list of attributes that Bonnie ascribes to her hoped-for hero, which include strongness, fastness, and fresh from the fightness, and more to do with the timeless quality of that initial question. Here is a woman begging for a contemporary hero to fight contemporary problems. Bonnie knows that the Hercules of history would possibly be too bamboozled by the implications of the impending Greek default to find the time to plug Bonnie's gaping existential chasm with his heroic euphemism. Similarly, Maui Tiki Tiki Ataranga may struggle to confront today's rising odds by hitting them with his auntie's magic jawbone. So, heroes, absolutely. Of our time, no. So, what has the Southern man got to bring to the party? What's in his kete to help us with our rising odds? I'm going to sling a few sample problems on the big board just to kick them off. Let's see, off the top of my head, global financial crisis, catastrophic climate change, and runaway overpopulation. Let's see how the Southern man is going to knock these bastards off. First up, the global financial crisis. What has the Southern man, a smallhold farmer, got to contribute to Lee's intellectual dinner table discourse about what we've got to do about the global financial crisis? I thought nothing. And then, in the Miramar Public Library, I came upon this ancient copy of the Otago Daily Times. The story pertained to a stockyard sale. Bessie was on the block. Over the years, she had provided her owner with her fair share of fluffy dividends. She was a perfectly sound investment. But Bessie was not for sale. What was for sale was Bessie's eventual lamb. Then things got weirder still. In their excitement, the cockies began bidding on the lamb that would come out of the lamb that came out of Bessie. Let's call her Bessie the Third. Bessie the Third's owner then hocked the rights to Bessie the Third's future wool. In a moment, the yard was floor to ceiling high in bales of high-grade potential wool. Then, one of the brash young cockies bet his clip of the future wool that before Bessie the Third was born, Bessie the Second would drop down dead, in which case he would have the rights to hock her off for dog tucker. Everyone was getting rich off Bessie the First's short sales and derivatives. Bessie the First was now too big to fail. Then, into the yard walked a man no one had seen before. The crowds parted as he made his way up towards Bessie the First and lifted her hind legs, revealing to an astonished crowd the shriveled pouch that once contained Bessie the Weather's rambolics. In a moment, the Southern man had docked the economic fly strike of orgiastic optimism at the base. I put it to you that he could use this superpower of bollocks detection on everything from the impending state-owned asset sales all the way through to Facebook. Whew. So, with our money worries solved, it's time to roll up our sleeves and get on with the job of cleaning up the backyard. Climate change. I haven't made it easy for the Southern man, have I? There's not many do-gooders out there who haven't flung their celebrity rocks in this particular glass house. At first glance, the Southern man seems quite out of place in this group. For one thing, he is a resident of the South Island of New Zealand, that famously 100% pure, pristine natural environment. And on the other hand, he is a farmer. And wait a sec, that puts him top of the carbon class. The very thought of hearing the Southern man pontificate on environmental best practice sounds at first naive and subsequently sinister. Kind of like how I received my sex education, first from a nun and then a priest. I put it to you that the Southern man is neither too naive nor too culpable to help. And I'll show you how. This is a picture of the high-profile South Islander and resident high-profile artist as well, Graham Sidney. Mr. Sidney has used his high standing in the South Island community to come out swinging against proposals to site a wind farm in his beloved Central Otago. Mr. Sidney claims that such a proposal will be a distasteful, man-made incursion into the 100% pure, pristine, natural environment that he depicts in his paintings so often and so well. Now, I haven't come here tonight to argue with you about whether or not wind farms are man-made. But I have come here to argue that Central Otago is anything but a 100% pure, pristine, natural environment. In fact, this is a photograph of Central Otago taken before humans arrived. Note the extensive forest cover and heavy presence of moas. The first people along were the Māori tribe Ngāi Tahu. They ate the birds and burned the forests. Next up were the gold miners. They gouged valleys, redirected rivers, and sluiced away entire hills. And then they left. Then came the Southern man. He toiled tirelessly over the course of many years to transform this man-scarred landscape into the iconic, man-made, nay, southern man-made landscapes that Mr. Graham Sidney depicts so often and so well. The Southern man has proven experience, making seemingly 100% pure, pristine, natural environments out of the sow's ear of catastrophic climate change. I'm not saying that the Southern man will be able to stop climate change. I don't believe anyone can. But the Southern man is the one person in the world with the wherewithal to ensure that after a century or two of hard yakka, you won't even notice it happened. Since the baby boomer generation was born, the world's population has rocketed exponentially from 2 billion all the way up to 7 billion people. Now, I don't want to outgore you with the details. We're here for solutions. But common sense would have it that too many new people are being born. Yes. Because at this stage of my research, I too was beginning to notice a pattern. The Southern man has a habit of looking at problems from the other end of the stick. And there, at the sticky end, I made an astonishing discovery. In the 1950s, folks popped their clogs at an average age of 52 years old. Now, the average citizen's daisies remain resolutely unpushed until 82 years of age. The problem is not more new people being born, it's more old people living longer. But what to do about it? Nothing in my research suggested to me that the Southern man would be in favour of octogenericide, and God knows nor am I. You old people make up the bulk of my theatre-going public. I admit that I didn't know what the Southern man would do about octogenericide. I didn't know what the Southern man would do about other man-made disasters like nuclear proliferation or gender inequality or the Labour Party. But now I do. Because in order to seek for wisdom, I returned to the horse's mouth. At the time, I had in my pocket $5.91 plus GST. That happens to be just the exact amount required to purchase a 1/16 of a page advertisement in the Tuapeka Times. So I advertised for a Southern man to help me with some questions that I had in my head. With the benefit of hindsight, I realised that I may have left myself open to misinterpretation, especially after receiving letters from Lonely Heart of Lawrence and the Balclutha Bear. Happily, my loss was their gain. I forwarded their correspondence to one another, and 2 months later, I received this in the post. So, Neil and Rob's problems were solved, but I was still missing the man of my dreams. But where to find him? It's not like this alpine philosopher was in possession of a name, let alone an @Twitter hashtag. Like Art Garfunkel, I realised that I couldn't do this on my own. I needed the full weight of New Zealand's public sector behind me. And I knew that no civil servant worth their job for life would so much as get out of bed in the morning for anything less than a 105-page, fully annotated, indexed, peer-reviewed academic report with references to Arthur Schopenhauer and Richard Dean Anderson. So I published. My thesis, soon to be available for purchase in the foyer, combines an in-depth anthropological advocacy of dynamic hypergeneralization, plus a thrilling cost-benefit analysis charting 2 potential courses of New Zealand's future. On one side of the ledger, the costs of constantly retooling a hyper-specialised knowledge economy for every new bubble industry that briefly graces our shores, the damage costs of increasingly frequent extreme weather events, and the gold card fees for a cohort of old coozers riding high on the last of the nanny state hogs. That rolled in at about $436 trillion. On the other side of the ledger, the costs of a spiral-bound notebook, a pair of Hallenstein stubbies, and a return ferry trip to Picton for the purposes of preserving, cataloguing and disseminating the southern man's backcountry wisdom for salvation on a national scale. That rolled in at $255.75. According to Arthur Schopenhauer, every truth goes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Then, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted and regarded as self-evident. Try as I might, I couldn't get past stage 1. The Minister of Economic Development, Stephen Joyce, could not have misread my hypothesis more vehemently if he had played it backwards on a record player. He accused me of Ludditism, socialism, environmentalism, Confucianism, masochism, monarchism, terrorism, anarchism, feminism, postmodernism, dogmatism, surrealism, onanism, priapism, Zionism, Buddhism, and yoga. Demoralised, but not disheartened, I posted my thesis to the one group who truly knows the South and who truly has New Zealand's bright, bright future at heart. Ngāi Tahu. It was obvious. Ngāi Tahu and the Southern man are utterly ideologically aligned. Like the Southern man, Ngāi Tahu had fled their hellish ancestral lands to settle on the blasted heaths of Te Waiponamu. And like the Southern man, Ngāi Tahu's northern-leaning cousins consider them to be a pack of yokels. I wrote this to them in the cover letter that I posted along with my thesis. My petition received a prompt dismissal as probably racist. I have never been so probably insulted in all my life. In rebuttal, I posted them a copy of my acclaimed bicultural treatise, Tino Rangatiratanga Mother Huaka. I await their formal apology. Rejected now by both signatories to Te Tiriti o Waitangi, I found myself at a complete dead end. Where was my refuge of last resort? The homeless, after all, they've got night shelters. The sick, well, they've got hospitals. Even the ACT Party still has Epsom. Where is there for the intellectually displaced? Those whose ideas have been deemed by the powers that be to be unfit for human consumption. Creative New Zealand! Oh, that most beautiful contradiction in terms. I thought that I'd burned my bridges with this particular organisation following the publication of Beggars and Choosers, the complete written correspondence between Richard Meros and Creative New Zealand Volume 1. Kim Hill described me as having the same effect on the state-funded art sector as Dan Brown had on the Catholic Church. Touché. However, desperate times call for desperate measures. So with my heart in my mouth and my cap in my hand, I applied for an arts grant of $255.75. 3 months later, I was awarded a grant of $25,575. Okay. Honestly, I'm begging you, shh. So I flew. Dunedin Airport stands in the middle of a sheep paddock and a statue of the Southern Man greets you at the door. As far as heroic quests go, he was going to be easier to find than Kim.com in a pie shop. Then I looked closer. I felt like Charlton Heston before a graven image. This wasn't a statue designed to inspire pilgrims to Southern virtue. This was a sinister, false manifestation. In the same way that fellow Dunedin company Cadbury's annually exploits the death of Jesus in order to hawk their Easter eggs, this statue was nothing more than an execrable commercial piggyback designed to sell an equally execrable beer. In my horror, I was nearly bowled over by a cherry red RAV4 with antlers on the front. The driver asked me what my fucking eyes were for. I told him that they were for searching for the Southern Man. Richard? It was Wu Chi, back from a weekend volunteering with the Farmy Army in Christchurch. As we drove, we talked. I admitted to Wu Chi that I'd never really thought of him as the charitable type. Wu Chi told me that he did not consider being part of the Farmy Army to be charity. He was, after all, a dyed-in-the-wool, 6th-generation South Islander. And looking after his community, well, that just felt a little bit like looking after his family. And then I realized what I'd been searching for had been under my nose all along. Wu Chi was the Southern Man. Somehow my Pākehā-centric upbringing had blinded me to the possibility of Wu Chi's Southern manity. But there he was, innovative, resourceful, resilient, and beneath that craggy exterior beat a heart of pure gold. He had been there for me when I needed a job. He had been by my side in the hospital, and he was there for me now. I took out my spiral-bound notebook and asked Wu Chi for directions to the promised land. Wu Chi told me how he truly, deeply believed that New Zealand would be the best country in the world if it wasn't for the aftershocks. And the gays. And the Greens, feminists, tourists, 1080, Meridian Energy, carbon tax, Chekhov, MAF, Islanders, and the Māori. Wu Chi was a typical South Islander. But he was not the Southern Man. If it were possible for us to increase our nation's GDP through moaning, then New Zealand would be the richest nation on earth. Wu Chi dropped me where the road turns to dust, and he gave me a box of stone fruit and a hug. Good luck, he said, and he meant it. I hiked into the hills, away from the cities, roads, tourists and towns, and nearer to the Southern Man. I stopped for a drink beside the pristine Queen's Chain. It tasted a lot like Speight's. So I followed the trail upstream and came upon a farmer hosing the effluent out of his milking shed. Charles was a good sort, but he was not the Southern Man. He refused the title farmer, preferring instead manager. I asked Charles where I could find the Southern Man. Not here, he said. Not for years, all company land. He made a gesture as far as the eye could see. Charles produced his iPhone, and together we pinched and pushed our way across a Google map of the South Island, eliminating urban sprawl, corporate conglomerate, national parks, and everywhere used as a location for the Hobbit. Only one last outpost remained. I bid farewell to Charles with a full-hearted pledge to look him up on Facebook. I made for the tundra, and there, after a 4-day tramp, and after a lifetime of overeducated underachievement, I found the Southern Man. He was resting against the stump of a tree, as if he was taking a short nap, eyes closed. An empty thermos, a chipped enamel mug, a pouch of tobacco. His horse unbridled, a dog pulled up by his side, the ashes of a burned out fire. He seemed so peaceful. I didn't want to disturb him. But the nation couldn't wait. Excuse me, sir. My name is Richard Meros. I've travelled many days to re-find you, and I have some questions I must ask. How can I convince a hyper-specialised knowledge economy to embrace a sustainable regeneralisation without requiring a reversion to an unattainable pastoral ideal? Oh, and how can increasingly limited resources be more equitably redistributed without disincentivising entrepreneurial innovation? Oh yeah, and do you think that this looks like a picture of a man strangling a chicken? He didn't answer, but his eyes opened and fell on me. He beckoned. I drew closer. Something was wrong. His skin, like crumpled cardboard, betrayed a fading pulse. He was dying. Emotion overwhelmed me. A single tear tracked down the dust in my cheek and fell on my spiral-bound notebook. He looked down at the tear, then up at my quivering lip, and drawing his dying breath, he exhaled through tobacco-stained teeth 2 words: harden up. And then he was gone. Gone. His horse nuzzled him, breathing hot steam in his face, then reared up and took off into the mist. His dog cocked its leg against the stump of a tree in salute, and then raced off after a hare. I was, at last, alone. It was over. After all my trials, I had finally found the one man that could have saved the fair-go punch above our weight God zone that we've always bragged about, but never lifted a finger to actually achieve. And now he was gone, and I was left with nothing. Nothing but 2 words and $25,000 of Creative New Zealand cash. Harden up. And there, upon that hill, I understood. These words are a patriotic Viagra. Yes, we can for 21st century Aotearoa. I created this exciting and visually dynamic PowerPoint presentation. I opened my show at Bats, knowing full well that that would mean it would wind up here at Downstage, where I could speak to you, my true target audience, about the meaning of the Southern man's dying words. I realised that I'd been softened by a lifetime of false expectation. some impossible utopia of free milk in schools, free healthcare and free education, subsidising me into a job in the free market where I could enjoy the soak-up trickle-down of easy money till my free pension kicked in at 65. That was my dream, just as it had been the reality for the previous generation. And I don't blame the baby boomers. If I had that kind of cake, I would have eaten it too. But now it is gone, and it's never coming back. I'd always wanted to be Richard Meros. Now I realise I must become Richard Meros. Because we are a nation that cannot expect to have better lives than the nation before. The future will not be better than now. And that's okay, because that makes us the pioneers of a new economic paradigm. We must be the resourceful. We must be the resilient, because we have no other choice. We must become the southern men of our own times. And we can, because despite generations of semi-softening, there lurks something deep within our DNA that likes when winters freeze and summers scorch. It knows that hardening is not something to be endured, but to be enjoyed. Deep within each of us glimmers that craggy hardness that knows how to leave behind the old and embrace the new, whatever that may be. He is in us, the new pioneers. He is in us as we venture into the unknown. We are the resourceful. We are the resilient. We are the hard. And that is why I, Richard Meros, am facing you when I salute the Southern Man. Thank you so much for listening to me.